We're back again. You've processed chapters 7 and 8. I'm sure you did a great job writing your chapter summary for chapter 7 and 8, which you could do together on one page. Sorry if I didn't mention that. If you did two, that's absolutely fine. But if you whenever we read them together, you can just do one page for them, okay? Today we're going to read two more chapters. We're going to read chapters 9 and 10. So if you remember, the boys were plugging along, learning their lessons. Neither one of them are very happy about it. Matt is trying desperately to teach Etienne how to read, but they just don't seem to like each other very much. I feel like, now remember, when you read, a lot of this is your opinion, which is one of the fun things about reading. Now, your opinion can certainly be wrong, but everybody can have their opinion about what they think is going to happen. That's kind of the fun thing about making predictions, is if you make a prediction, it's just that. It's a prediction. Nobody knows for sure if it's going to be right or wrong. You're just kind of guessing what you think might happen. And that's what makes just reading so much fun, because it's all you. It's whatever you want it to be. But then the author has their own thoughts. So we're going to see what the author has to think about that. But we'll see how the boys are going to carry on, okay, with chapters 9 and 10. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We've got a few words up here. The word partridge, that you probably know what that is. I mainly put it up here just because the spelling of it looks a little bit weird. But a partridge is a bird, a nice little plump bird. Then we have the word contemptuous. Contemptuous means that if you're contemptuous, you're not very respectful. And as you can think, I'm thinking maybe it's Etienne who's not being very respectful. We'll have to see. I'm not sure. Companion. Do you remember the story we read with the seeing eye dog? And it talked about the dog as being a companion, kind of a friend. Okay, a companion is a friend. And then we've got the word sapling. A sapling is like a baby tree, a very young tree. Not a big old trunk of a tree, but just a little, little sweet tree. Chapter 9 on page 39. Everybody get with me. Cozy up. That's the fun thing about reading. A few mornings later, at the end of the lesson, Matt delayed Etienne. "How did you kill that rabbit?" he asked. Remember the rabbit? There was one there, sorry, pointing to the offering Etienne had thrown on the table. "There's no bullet hole in it." Now remember, Matt, in order for him to catch a rabbit, would needed to have shot it. And he's saying, "How did you catch that rabbit? There's not a bullet hole in it." "Indian not use bullet for rabbit," Etienne answered scornfully. "Well then how? How? There's no hole at all." For a moment it seemed that Etienne would not bother to answer. Then the Indian shrugged. "Etienne show," he said. "Come." Ooh, Etienne's going to show Matt how he killed the rabbit. Huh. Matt was dumbfounded, meaning shocked if he's dumbfounded. It was the first sign the Indian had given of what exactly? He had not sounded friendly, but there was not time to puzzle this out right now. Etienne was walking across the clearing, and he apparently expected Matt to follow. Pleased and curious, Matt hobbled after him, grateful that he no longer needed the crutch. Now he's still hobbling, meaning he's kind of limping, because remember, he had hurt his ankle. He doesn't need the crutch anymore, but it still bothers him a little bit. But he's trying to hurry up to catch up with Matt. At the edge of the clearing, the Indian stopped and searched the ground. Presently, he stooped down under a black spruce tree, poked into the dirt, and jerked up a long, snake-like root. He drew from the leather pouch at his belt a curious sort of knife. The blade curved into a hook. With one sure stroke, he split one end of the root, then peeled off the bark by pulling at it with his teeth. He separated the whole length into two strands, which he spliced together by rolling them against his bare thigh. Now, this takes a lot of visualization, guys. They're giving us many steps. It's kind of hard to keep up with it, but just try to picture what's happening here, okay, just to give you an idea, because if you don't, you'll have lost this whole paragraph, okay? So just try to make your pictures as we're reading. Next, he searched about the bushes till he found two forked saplings about 3 feet apart, so two baby trees. He trimmed the twigs from these, drawing his knife toward his chest, as Matt had been taught not to do. Those of you that are Cub Scouts probably know that. Then he cut a stout branch and rested it lightly across the forks of his saplings. From the thread-like root, he made a noose, like a loop, and suspended it from the stick so that it hung just above the ground. He worked without speaking, and it seemed to Matt that all this took him no time at all. "Rabbit run into trap," he said finally. "Pull stick into bush so white boy can kill." "Golly," said Matt, filled with admiration. "I hadn't thought of making a snare. I didn't know you could make one without string or wire." "Make more," Etienne ordered, pointing into the woods. "Not too close." After Etienne had gone, Matt managed to make 2 more snares. So that was Etienne's instruction. You make more. They were clumsy things, and he was not too proud of them. So nothing great. But it's just, it's like anything. If it's your first time at doing something, it's not going to be great, is it? It takes practice to do things. They were clumsy things, and he was not too proud of them. Splitting a slippery root, he discovered, was not as easy as it looked. He spoiled a number of them before he mastered the trick of splicing them together. They did not slide as easily as the one Etienne had made, but they seemed strong enough. Next morning, he showed his traps to Etienne. He had hoped for some sign of approval, but all he got was a grunt and a shrug. So he was kind of hoping that Etienne would be like, "All right, that's good for your first set." But all he got was a and a shrug. I don't think Etienne's much one for being like, "Good boy, yeah." He knew that to Etienne, his work must look childish. However, on the 3rd day, one of his own snares had been upset, though the animal had got away. Well, at least he was attracted to it, I guess. The day after that, to his joy, there was actually a partridge struggling to free itself in the bushes where the stick had caught. This time the grunt with which Etienne rewarded him sounded very much like his grandfather's good. So that's pretty good. Etienne is doing something like good. Silently, the Indian watched as Matt reset the snare. Then they walked back to the cabin, Matt swinging his catch as nonchalantly as he had seen Etienne do. Now, let me stop here for just a second. Remember, Matt did not have a gun, and once his gun was taken by Ben, he was like, "Okay, well, I guess I've only got fish to eat then." Etienne has shown him how he can catch a rabbit. I mean, that's huge. That was a big thing. So how do you think Matt's feeling about himself right now? And how do you think he's feeling about Etienne? Think about that, because that's you just make your own opinions. "You don't need to bring me any more food," he boasted. "I'll catch my own meat from now on." Sounds like he's feeling pretty proud of himself. Nevertheless, Etienne continued to bring him some offering every morning. Now, do you think that's Etienne's idea? Do you think before he's leaving his camp that he's like, what can I take to Matt? Or do you think somebody's telling him to do that? Lots to think about. Not always fresh meat. He seemed to know exactly when Matt had finished the last scrap of rabbit or duck. Sometimes he brought a slab of corn cake or a pouch full of nuts, once a small cake of maple sugar. Plainly, he felt bound to keep the terms of his grandfather's treaty. So he's keeping up his grandfather's end of the deal. Matt stuck to his part of the bargain as well, though the lessons were an ordeal for them both. An ordeal meaning it was a big chore for both of them to have to do these reading lessons. Neither one of them liked it. Matt knew well enough what a poor teacher he was. Matt doesn't feel like he's a very good teacher. Sometimes it seemed that Etienne was learning in spite of him. Once the Indian had resigned himself to mastering 26 letters. He took them in a gulp, scorning the childish candle and door and table that Matt had devised. Soon he was spelling out simple words. The real trouble was that Etienne was contemptuous. The whole matter of white man's words seemed to him nonsense. So he's being a little bit disrespectful about the whole thing. He thinks white man's words and letters are just silly. He just doesn't see the need for it. Impatiently, they hurried through the lessons to get on with Robinson Crusoe. Matt suspected that the only reason Etienne agreed to come back day after day was that he wanted to hear more of that story. So he feels like Etienne's actually getting to like hearing about Robinson Crusoe and what adventures he's going to get into. I think he's thinking Robinson Crusoe is not the sharpest tack. He's thinking he's not very smart, that an Indian would be much smarter out there, but he probably likes kind of hearing the shenanigans he gets into. Skipping over the pages that sounded like sermons, meaning there's some pages that seem kind of boring. So Matt knows the story so well, he knows where to skip over those pages. Matt chose the sections he liked best himself. Now he came to the rescue of the man Friday. Etienne sat quietly, and Matt almost forgot him in his own enjoyment of his favorite scene. This is one of Matt's favorite parts, and he almost forgot Etienne was even there. There was the mysterious footprint on the sand, the canoes drawn up on the lonely beach, and the strange, wild-looking men with 2 captives. One of the captives they mercilessly slaughtered. The fire was set blazing for a cannibal feast. Then the second captive made a desperate escape, running straight to where Crusoe stood watching. 2 savages pursued him with horrid yells. Matt glanced up from the book and saw that Etienne's eyes were gleaming. So this is getting kind of, creepy and scary, and Etienne's getting kind of liking this part of it. I mean, he's a 14-year-old boy. He's probably like, cool, what's going to happen? He hurried on. No need to skip here. Crusoe struck a mighty blow at the first cannibal, knocking him senseless. Then, seeing that the other was fitting an arrow into his bow, he shot and killed him. Matt read on. Okay, now, so these savages had captured this one guy, and they were going to kill him. And he managed to escape, and he ran towards Robinson Crusoe. And Robinson Crusoe fought off those 2 savages. He killed the one of them, but fought them off. And this man that had run to Robinson Crusoe had been saved because Robinson Crusoe had saved his life. Now, you see here again in the book, we've got a direct quote from Robinson Crusoe. It's in italics, it's squeezed in. This is a very old book, so some of these words might be a little bit different sounding, okay? The poor savage who fled but had stopped, though he saw both his enemies had fallen, yet now in this case they're talking about the savage as the man that Robinson Crusoe saved, okay? Yet was so frightened with the noise and fire of my piece that he stood stock still, and neither came forward nor went backward. I hallooed again to him, and made signs to him to come forward, which he easily understood, and came a little way, then stopped again. He stood trembling, as if he had been taken prisoner, and had just been to be killed, as his 2 enemies were. So he's afraid, thinking Robinson Crusoe is going to kill him too. I beckoned to him again to come to me, and gave him all signs of encouragement that I could think of, and he came nearer and nearer, kneeling down every 10 or 12 steps in token of acknowledgement for saving his life. So he's walking closer to Robinson Crusoe, and every now and then he's kneeling to show that he's respectful. They're not speaking the same language, but he wants to show that he thanking this guy for saving him from these savages, but still not sure what Robinson Crusoe is going to do with him. Is he going to kill him too? I smiled at him and looked pleasantly, and beckoned to him to come still nearer. At length he came close to me, and then he kneeled down again and kissed the ground, and taking my foot set it upon his head. This, it seemed, was a token of swearing to be my slave. Now, the word slave, we know what that means. It's when people are owned, typically against their will. Now, in this case, he sounds willing, but meaning that you're going to work for somebody else, okay? Not a great word that we like to use. When we hear the word slave, we think of some poor people who are being forced to work against their will. So let's see what happens. Etienne sprang to his feet, a thundercloud wiping out all pleasure from his face. So remember, he was kind of enjoying this. He was going, ooh, somebody got killed. What's going to happen? He was kind of into it. But the minute the word slave got mentioned, he gets infuriated. He stands up, and he is very angry. He does not like the use of that word. He doesn't know what's, he just doesn't think this is right. "No," he shouted, "not so." Matt stopped, bewildered. "Him never do that." "Never do what?" "Never kneel down to white man." But Crusoe had saved his life. Not kneel down, Etienne repeated fiercely. Not be slave. Better die. So Etienne is saying it would have been better for him to be killed than to be the white man's slave. He thinks that's awful, that he would be the white man's slave. It just infuriates Etienne. And Matt didn't even think anything about it. Matt's like, well, he saved his life. He'll be his slave. Matt opened his mouth to protest, but Etienne gave him no chance. In 3 steps, he was out of the cabin. Now he'll never come back, Matt thought. He sat slowly, turning over the pages. He had never questioned the story. Matt had never really even thought about it as being anything weird. He was just like, well, whatever. Like Robinson Crusoe, he had thought it natural and right that the wild man should be the white man's slave. Was there perhaps another possibility? The thought was new and troubling. So Matt never even thought twice about this. He just thought that's the way it was supposed to be. But now he's seeing it from Etienne's perspective, and he's thinking, gosh, could there be another side to this story? Is there a problem with this man wanting to be a slave and Robinson Crusoe expecting that he be the slave? You know, Matt had just had a kind of a one-track mind, and now he's seeing this other side to the story. So that's kind of interesting. All right, let's go on. We're going to go ahead and read chapter 10, okay? So chapter 10, we've got our same words up here. All right, chapter 10, page 45. Everybody okay? You can pause it if you need to go get a drink, but I'm going to go on, okay? He felt weak with relief when next morning Etienne walked stiffly into the cabin and sat down at the table. So Matt's grateful that Etienne has come back. Stumbling over himself, he set about the lesson. As soon as he could, he picked up Robinson Crusoe. In the night, he had carefully thought out just what he was going to say, if Etienne ever gave him another chance. Now he had to talk fast because he could see that Etienne was set against hearing any more of this book. So Matt all night long had kind of worried, what am I going to say to Etienne about this book? He's just furious. You know, how am I going to make this okay? Let me go on, he pleaded. It's different from now on. Friday, that's what Robinson Crusoe named him. He doesn't kneel anymore. Not slave? No, Matt lied. Now Matt lied. Friday is Robinson Crusoe's slave, but he lies because they really don't have a typical master-slave relationship. It doesn't sound that way from what we hear. But Matt's telling Etienne, no, he's not a slave because he wants Etienne to stay and listen. After that, they get to be, well, companions, friends. They share everything together. Ignoring the suspicion on Etienne's face, Matt began hurriedly to read. He was thankful that he knew the book so well that he was able to see when trouble might be coming. One of the first words Crusoe taught his man Friday was the word master. Now that's a problem. To be his master, then Friday would be his slave, wouldn't he? Luckily, he caught that one in time. So Matt knows the story again. He knows it so well that he catches those things. And he's not going to read those out loud. He doesn't want to make Etienne angry. And it was true, Crusoe and his new companion did go about together, sharing their adventures. Only, Matt thought, it would have been better perhaps if Friday hadn't been quite so thick-headed. After all, there must have been a thing or two about that desert island that a native who had lived there all his life could have taught Robinson Crusoe. So a native is exactly what it says in the book, somebody that's lived there all their life. And Matt's thinking, couldn't Friday have taught Robinson Crusoe a thing or two? But Friday apparently is just doing what he's told to do. When Matt closed the book, Etienne nodded. Then, as so many times before, he took Matt by surprise. You like go fish? He asked. Oh, I sure would, Matt said gratefully. Stopping to pick up his fish pole from beside the door, he ran to overtake the Indian boy who strode ahead. He knew his grin was stretching from one ear to the other, but he couldn't hide his feelings as Etienne did. They walked some distance, Matt managing to keep pace with the Indian's swift stride, determined not to let Etienne know that his ankle was aching. They seemed to be following no particular trail. Finally, they came out on a part of the creek that Matt had not seen before. It was shallow here, studded with rocks and pebbles, so that the water rippling over them made little rapids or collected in quiet pools. Here Etienne stopped, broke off a sapling, and instead of making a fish pole, drew his knife from his pouch and quickly shaved a sharp point, making a spear. Then he stepped gently into the stream. Matt stood watching. Etienne stood motionless, peering intently into a pool of clear water. All at once he stopped, darted his spear with one quick stroke, and came up with a glittering fish. So he has made a spear type thing just out of a sapling, and he stood in the water watching, and when he saw a fish, he was able to jab it with a spear to catch that fish. He studied it for a moment, so Etienne's looking at the fish he caught. Too small, he decided. To Matt's astonishment, he spoke to the fish quite solemnly a few incomprehensible words, then tossed it back into the stream. In a few moments, he had speared another, which he judged large enough to keep. Do same, he ordered now, coming back to the bank. He handed Matt the spear. He would just look ridiculous, Matt knew before he started. He waded in. Now again, this is all new to Matt. When you do something for the very first time, you probably look kind of silly. You're not used to doing it. And so Matt feels a little bit uncomfortable because he's afraid Etienne's going to laugh at him, which he might. But he's never done this before, so of course he's going to look a little bit silly doing it. He waded in and stood up to his knees, looking down into the sliding water. Presently a fish darted past. At least he thought it was a fish. It was hard to tell which was shadow and which might be a fish. At any rate, it was gone before he got his spear into the water. Presently he saw another, this one quite definitely a fish, calmly drifting in the pool. He jabbed at it hopelessly. He was sure his stick actually touched the slippery thing. He lunged at it, lost his footing, and went down with a splash that would scare off any fish for miles around. When he came up dripping, he saw Etienne watching him with a horrid grin. Ugh. Suddenly he felt hot in spite of the icy water. Why had Etienne brought him out here anyway? Had Etienne just wanted to show off his own cleverness and to make Matt look more clumsy than ever? Was this Etienne's answer in case Matt had any idea in his head about being a Robinson Crusoe? For a moment Matt glared back at Etienne with a scowl as black as any Indian's. Then he wiped his nose with the back of his hand and sloshed back to the bank. He snatched up his own pole and line, so he's gone back to get his own fishing pole. That's what he's used to, not a spear. He poked about under the wet leaves and found a good juicy worm and fitted it to his hook. I'll do it my own way, he said. I can catch plenty of fish with this, and that's what matters. Etienne sat on the bank and watched. To Matt's satisfaction, in no time there was a tug on the line, a strong one. An impressive-looking fish rose to the surface, thrashing fiercely. Matt gave a jerk, and the line came swinging out of the water so suddenly that he almost lost his footing again. It was empty. Fish broke line, Etienne observed, as if anyone couldn't see that. Furious at Etienne, at the fish, and at himself, Matt examined the break, unable to face the Indian. He had lost more than a good fish. His hook had disappeared as well. The only hook he had. So the only hook he had now is gone. Of course, Etienne noticed those black eyes never missed anything. Make a new hook, he suggested. Without even getting to his feet, he reached out and broke a twig off a maple sapling. Out came the crooked knife again. In a few strokes, he cut a piece as long as his little finger, carved a groove around the middle, and whittled both ends into sharp points. Now he stepped into the water and tied Matt's line expertly around the groove. Put on 2 worms, he said. Cover up all hook. He didn't offer to find the worms. Matt had lost all interest in fishing. He knew that somehow or other he would just provide more amusement for Etienne, but he couldn't refuse. He didn't have to wait long before another fish caught hold. This time he landed it neatly. Good, said Etienne from the bank. Big. Matt was trying to get it off the line. He swallowed the whole hook, he said. Better white man's hook, Etienne said. Turn around inside fish, not get away. So Etienne, they made a hook. And Etienne saying, that's better than white man's hook. Back on the bank, Matt slit the fish and extracted the hook and his line. Now this is kind of grossing me out because I am not a hunter. I don't like to touch squishy fishy or worms. Anyway, they're cutting the fish open and they're going to get the hook outside the inside of the fish. But, you know, some of you might think that's kind of cool. I'm kind of like, ick. Easy, make new hook, Etienne said. Make many hooks. So he's saying you can make as many hooks as you want to. That's no big deal. Of course, looking down at the simple thing in his hand, Matt realized that he never again need worry about losing a hook, because now he could make one anytime he wanted to. Oh, he could make a new hook, one wherever he happened to be. It was another necessary thing that Etienne had shown him. He's teaching him all kinds of things, just as he had made the snare. He wasn't sure why Etienne had bothered, but grudgingly he had to admit that Etienne had proved to him once again that he didn't always have to depend on white man's tools. All at once, he was hungry. The sun was straight overhead, so if the sun is straight up in the sky, you know it's around lunchtime. And it would be a long tramp back through the woods before he could cook his fish. Now he saw that Etienne had the same thought. The Indian was heaping up a small pile of pine needles and grass. He drew from his muskrat skin pouch a piece of hard stone with bits of quartz embedded in it. Striking it with his knife, he soon had a spark, which he blew into a flame. I could have done that myself, Matt thought. Now, at least he didn't say that out loud. He's just thinking that. In fact, he had done it many a time, but he had not realized that he could use a common stone as his flint. Get fish ready, Etienne ordered now, pointing to the two fish on the bank. Matt did not like his masterful tone, but he did as he was told. So Matt doesn't like being bossed around by Etienne, but he's doing it anyway. By the time he had the two fish split and gutted and washed in the creek, Etienne had a fire blazing. Matt was curious to see how he could go about the cooking. He watched as Etienne cut two short branches, bending them first to make sure they were green. And why would you want a green stick? They're getting ready to put it in the fire. A green stick, if it's fresh like that, isn't going to burn in the fire. He trimmed and sharpened them rapidly. Then he thrust a pointed end into each fish from head to tail. A small green stick was set crosswise inside the fish to hold the sides apart. He handed one stick to Matt. One on each side of the fire, the boys squatted and held their sticks to the blaze. From time to time, Etienne fed the fire with dry twigs. When the flesh was crisp and brown, they ate, still silently. Matt licked his fingers. His resentment had vanished, along with his hunger. Golly, he said, that was the best fish I ever ate. Good, said Etienne. Across the fire, he looked again at Matt, and his eyes gleamed. He was laughing again, but somehow not with scorn. He's probably just laughing, like they're two friends together. What did you say to that fish you threw back? Remember back at the beginning of the chapter when Etienne had speared a fish and he decided it was too small and he spoke to it and then threw it back in the water? So Matt's saying, what did you say to that fish? I say to him not to tell other fish, Etienne said seriously, not scare away. So Etienne's not being silly. He's serious. He told him, don't tell the other fish we're here. I don't want you to scare them away. You actually think a fish could understand? Etienne shrugged. Fish know many things, he replied. Matt sat pondering this strange idea. Well, it seemed to work, he said finally. At least the other fish came along. A wide grin spread slowly across Etienne's face. It was the first time Matt had seen him smile. And that's the end of chapter 10. Now, we've learned quite a bit here. Think about all the things that Etienne has taught Matt. Many, many things that were necessary actually for Matt, Etienne has taught him, showing him just, how the Native Americans' way is perhaps much better, much more resourceful than the white man's way was, taught him many things. But Matt's also teaching Etienne some things. Now, I don't think Etienne would admit that. I don't think he'd be real eager to say how much Matt had taught him, but they're learning from each other. Now, think about this at the end of chapter 10. What's their relationship like? I mean, think back to chapter 6 when they were first together and not happy with one another at all. Etienne especially not happy with Matt. Think how this relationship has evolved. I'm not exactly sure how much time has passed at this point, but sometime. I mean, they've spent quite a bit of time together learning and such. So how has at the end of this chapter, if you were sitting around that fire with them, how do you think their relationship with one another would be? What would you think as a person looking on the outside. What was their relationship like? Okay, so we're going to, when we get back together again, this will be next week, we'll be reading, well, chapter 11 for sure. I can't remember exactly how many we're going, but we'll be reading some more. Again, if you want to read ahead, you may. Don't tell anybody what happens. If you all get together and talk, I don't want anybody sharing. Don't blow it for somebody, okay? That's why we don't watch movies ahead of time. Read the book first. You make the pictures in your mind. You decide. You get to make the predictions. Don't let anybody tell you. That takes the fun away, okay? But when we read it, then of course we can talk about it. You might even, if you have a fire pit at home, maybe, build a fire and cook some hot dogs on it or something. Pretend like you're Matt out in the wilderness, Matt and Etienne. That would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Okay, so your chapter summary. Now we did two chapters, so you can do them on one page. For my summary, I wrote, Etienne shows Matt how to catch a rabbit and fish. Etienne gets angry at some of the things that happen in Robinson Crusoe. So I kind of started to run out of room, but you don't have to use this exactly. If you have something better that you want to write that would help you remember chapters 9 and 10, then please go ahead and do that. Let me tell you this too. I've told you, now some of you have sent these in to me, and that's okay. You've sent pictures of them, that's fine. I want you to keep your actual papers for sure, and I'd like for you to keep them like in a folder or a file folder in order. They're going to come in handy when we finish the book, okay? So don't just toss them aside. Hang on to them. I will be collecting them in the end. I'm not sure how. We'll have to, I don't know if we'll have pickup days again or if you'll want to send pictures in. We'll have to see. Nobody knows for sure what's happening. So we'll see. We'll just keep going along this way, and it's working out okay. I hope you're getting used to being at home, learning from home. Maybe it's getting a little bit easier as I get used to it. For one thing, I hope you are too. But it's all getting a little bit easier. You all are doing great. I'm proud of you for working so hard. I'm proud of you for trying to be independent to help mom and dad out, just to make their life easy too, because they got lots going on also. Okay? Hang in there. Be awesome. You all are so fabulous, and I will see you when we come back to read chapter 11 and on. I can't remember exactly how far. All right, have a great day. Bye.